like to invite Director Commercial of Tourism New Zealand, Rene. Rene joined Tourism New Zealand in August 2015 as Director of Trade, PR and Major Events. He has 15 years of global experience in customer-led businesses, including Fonterra and Heineken, and most recently Marketing Director at Asia Pacific Breweries in Singapore. Today he will share with us his vision for the visitor ecosystem. So please join me in welcoming Mr. René de Monchy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kia ora. It's great to be here at the INZBC. This is my first time here, so it's great to join this group. As per the introduction, I wanted to give a little bit of a snapshot of the tourism or the visitor ecosystem we have here in New Zealand. As the Minister said earlier, tourism is either number one or number two sector in foreign exchange earnings for New Zealand. In fact, it's number one. It has been for the last couple of years, but it does oscillate between dairy and tourism. So it is a very important sector for us and a very large employer base as well. In fact, it's the largest employer base in New Zealand. So let me talk a little bit first about, those of you new to New Zealand, a little bit about how we measure the tourism sector or the visitor economy here in New Zealand. Our population base is about 4.5 million people, and annually we welcome 3.8 million visitors, which has grown over the last few years, has grown and continues to grow. And within that, 2 million of the 3.6 million, 3.8 million are visitor arrivals, and is the fastest growing segment of people coming into New Zealand. We also measure shoulder arrivals, which is the number in the middle there, 5.6. We look at, as Tourism New Zealand, we try and influence when people come to New Zealand. Like a lot of destinations, we have a peak period, and we are trying to encourage people to come outside of the peak so that we can start to spread the load of visitors coming into the country. So that's why that's an important measure. And I should also mention that's one of many, but one of the reasons we have an office in India, why we focus on India as a visitor market, is partly because your travel patterns are outside of our traditional peak periods of December through to February. So that's one of the things we use to assess a market that we think will be valuable to New Zealand. Possibly even more importantly is that international spend growing at 9% at almost 11 billion New Zealand dollars is also a very important measure for us. We measure value over volume. The Minister talked about that this morning as well. We want to ensure that we are enriching New Zealand by driving the value of the international visitor economy ahead of the volume of the international visitor economy. So I'll give you a little bit of a snapshot, and then I'll talk about our key priorities. I've only got about half a dozen slides, so I'll give you a snapshot. And there, what you see there are our top 6 markets that arrive in terms of visitor arrivals coming into New Zealand. And what's important to note there is that you see quite a lot of variability. We are a fairly niche destination in global terms as a destination to travel to, and that's why we operate a portfolio of markets. At a total holiday arrival number of almost 5%, but underneath that you see quite varying levels of growth. Australia is in slight decline at the moment, and fittingly so that this is the part of this conference is about aviation. One of the drivers for that has been a change in aviation capacity across the Tasman in the last 12 months, and the impact that that has had has taken the arrival numbers from growth into slight decline. We expect that to start growing again in the coming months as more capacity comes on stream. China and the US, number 2, number 3 markets for us in terms of size, continue to grow strongly. And then our more traditional markets, UK, Germany and Japan. Do note that the UK looks a little more negative than it really is. This is partly driven by last year at this time we had the British and Irish Lions rugby tour of New Zealand, which brings with it 25,000 eager British and Irish fans. So last year's numbers were up quite significantly, which is why this year looks a little bit more negative. But perhaps much more interesting to this audience is when we look at our more emerging markets in terms of growth. And India is at the top of that list for good reason. That's our key priority in terms of emerging markets. The Minister talked about that being our number 11 in terms of total arrivals. So not the largest of our markets, but showing really good, solid growth. And we are investing in that market for the long term. We see great potential for India as a visitor market to New Zealand for multiple reasons. I talked a bit about the times of travel, but we also, the speaker before me spoke about the changing demographics of the country, the emerging middle class, the increase of willingness to travel, the increase in aviation and connectivity. We also are very firm and work together with the airports and with other NZ Inc. Agencies to go. If we can help in getting a direct connection between India and New Zealand would be fantastic and a game changer, I think, for the visitor economy. And listed there are kind of our other emerging markets that we focus on: Indonesia, Philippines, Southeast Asia, and then in Latin America, Brazil and Argentina. What I want to talk about is historically we have been an organisation that is predominantly focused on attracting people to our destination. But increasingly over the last few years, we have thought much more about this as a visitor ecosystem. And in terms of our ambition and why we exist as a tourism board is to enrich New Zealand, to make New Zealand a better place, so that New Zealanders benefit. By New Zealanders, I mean all people that live here benefit from the visitor economy. And that's why, along with on the left-hand side of that chart where we talk about attracting people to the destination, growing value ahead of volume, etc., we also increasingly now focus on the right-hand side of that chart to make sure that the industry grows sustainably. How do we ensure that we share data insights to help with product innovation, that the industry develops, that we help with information and guidance for where investment should be made in amenities and in shared infrastructure that will help the visitor economy. And we do that for a couple of good reasons. One is we want to ensure that New Zealanders continue to see the value of the visitor economy and continue to embrace visitors when they come here. And equally, as a result of that, the visitors who will have been embraced while they were here will go home and tell their friends and family about a fantastic visit that they had to New Zealand, and therefore generating demand for future visitation. I'll close a little bit on our key priorities for us as an organisation, as Tourism New Zealand. 3 key areas that we are focusing on for the coming year and beyond. One is evolving our 100% Pure New Zealand campaign. We're lucky as a destination that we have benefited from almost 20 years of the positioning or the campaign 100% Pure New Zealand, which for lots of people in the world is a very aspiring and highly desirable statement and a reason for coming to New Zealand. But what we've realised is that whilst we have beautiful landscapes, which has been the key driver of our promotion, showing people our beautiful landscapes and scenery, it's actually the magic of the people that differentiates us from other destinations. There are many other beautiful places in the world, not quite as beautiful as New Zealand, but many other beautiful places in the world. We need to really bring the people story into the landscapes, which is a piece of work that we're working on at the moment. Destination readiness, I talked a little bit about earlier. That is about how do we ensure that the industry grows sustainably to the benefit and the enjoyment of people who live in New Zealand, as well as ensuring that the visitors have a fantastic stay while they're here. And the third piece of our focus area is how do we ensure that the benefits of tourism and visitor economy is spread more broadly across New Zealand. And that is by encouraging people to travel into our regions and make sure that the regions benefit from this growth, and a commitment in there to grow the regions by $1 billion per year by 2023. So that's a little whistle-stop tour of our, I had on there questions, but I don't think we have time for questions now, but that it gives you a little whistle-stop snapshot of how we look at the visitor ecosystem, what our key priorities are, and how important tourism is to New Zealand as a sector. Thank you very much.